but it also can be, here's a risk to our business, and here's what we recommend. And having just been in one of these meetings recently, when one of your presidents says, this is what's going to happen, and their line of business owner is there just isn't much more discussion than that. It's kind of discussion over. So we don't need to see the structure chart. So in terms of how we implement this program, talk a little bit about our structure. So I have a small, well, I guess it's a decent sized team. But in each major development organization, we have a security lead. And also within that, for example, what would that be? Like we call server technologies. It's the group that builds the core database and related technologies. So we have a security lead. There are also boatloads of products or components within that major product area. And we have security points of contact within each product component. Now I mentioned that those SPOCs, everybody's got pointy ears. They originally were the people who filled out the release checklist, but that kind of doesn't seem like a great job, does it? Go to MIT, get a master's degree, fill out checklists. No, nobody wants to do that job. But what they actually are is the first line of defense in development, because again, I don't want 20,000 developers calling up my chief hacking officer and asking him questions about how can you break products. That doesn't seem like a very scalable model. So taking those points of contact and making them not only the front line of defense, but giving them special training, special skills. We have a summit for them where we kind of brain dump what we know about building secure software, and frankly why it matters to customers and why it matters in terms from a regulatory standpoint. So we meet with them regularly, and we also use the security leads to bootstrap security and acquisitions. What does that mean? When we buy these companies, frequently we incorporate them into an existing line of business. Now the good news is they will inherit a lot of the development processes of that group just by osmosis. But we also use those security leads to help us reach out to those acquisitions and say, what are you doing, what are you not doing, and using them to help, again, to help that alignment that I talked about. We also have a regular steering committee which sort of focuses on engineering solutions to common problems. And now we've started an assurance steering committee. Again, why do we do this? Because we don't think that my group is the repository of geniuses. If somebody has done something that's successful in another group, we want to make sure that that becomes common knowledge or common lore. And that could be everything like we use static analysis tools, which is some of you who've used them know it's not always the easiest thing to roll them out. How do you be successful with that? So when you find something that works, you want to replicate that. And one of the ways to seed that kind of information sharing is to get together and talk once in a while. So we do that on a more formal basis and try to institutionalize best practice. I mentioned the SPOCs are the security experts within each product group, and we really can't, this has been a success area, we really cannot do our jobs without them, because it's the difference between my small group trying to reach tens of thousands of developers and having people in those groups who know what they're doing. And I talked a little bit about how they report on their compliance. I'll skip that. Well, maybe I should back up a little here. So the things that my group, I haven't talked about the particular components of assurance, but this is a quick little run through. So, how do we do what we do? We have secure coding standards that we are kind of the bedrock for what we do. Now, by the way, I kind of started those, and I started those in a very small way by deciding I was really tired of explaining to developers, this is a few years ago, what a buffer overflow was and how to prevent it. Like, didn't you get this in computer science? Wrote up one page, what is a buffer overflow? Second page, how to avoid it. And that is now about 300 and some pages. Now, we don't expect developers to read 300 pages and commit them to memory. That isn't going to happen. But what we do is we give them training, and which is tied around that, because it's pretty much where to go to look for answers. So they understand that these exist. And by the way, it's not just don't do this, it's how do you do this. If you want to handle this particular type of problem, what is our case law? What is our recommendations? What's the API you use? What is the correct way of doing something? And the one other thing we do, I occasionally get asked, why don't you publish these? One of the reasons we don't publish them is because one of the things that makes them effective is we have used examples real-life coding examples from prior screw-ups. So needless to say, I don't want that published even though we fixed them. But the reason we do that is, and I'm sure some of you have had the same experience, you talked as a developer, that would never happen. No one would do that. It never happened to me. Well, yeah, it did. See that development group? See that code? That was the development group that's 2 floors below you. And let me tell you what it cost to fix that problem because they made that mistake. You know, $1 million. So using real examples is more gripping to a developer than an abstract academic example in a manual. We train people on those. We have a number of we do formal certifications like FIPS and common criteria for certain products. We have customer-focused programs that also deal with assurance. One of the things my team is focused on now is to try to come up with more common modules for things. So if we have a common problem, let's look at coming up with an API for something or finding one instead of having everyone find their own way of solving the same problem. I have an ethical hacking team who works for me. They're quite scarily good at what they do. They're not actually, their job really isn't bug finding. I mean, they do that as a byproduct, but it's an extremely expensive way of finding defects in your software. So what their real job is actually knowledge transfer, because they are wickedly good at what they do, and I want them to be ahead of the research community. In fact, so that we know what the next type of attacks are, we can find those problems ourselves, we can develop a tool or coding technique or something that will help remediate that across the company before it becomes a huge problem. So how do we monitor security compliance? We have a bunch of metrics around what we do. I'll show you a chart in a minute. But basically they're focused, some of them are quantitative, like I mentioned the coding class, how many people have actually completed it. By the way, that number changes fairly frequently as we buy a new company, some new group gets rolled into a development organization, somebody moves, changes jobs. It'd be nice to say that everyone gets trained and that it stays at 97%, but that number actually fluctuates. The bug backlog by severity. The qualitative metrics have to do with how far along and how sophisticated people are in terms of some of our assurance measures, like using automated tools. And with that, let me step back a little. So there are all these different things we do. And one of the things we realized a few years ago is nobody could answer the question, who's doing what by development group? Now you'd like to think that there was a snappy answer to that, but there wasn't. So one of the guys who works for me came up with basically a scorecard. And part of that was so we could answer that question. And we realized that one of the things that could be really useful for is actually, first of all, reporting to management. How well are we doing? Do we do what we say we do across the company? How fast? When we bring a company in, how quickly are they going up that assurance curve? Are they doing things the way that we would expect them to do? So we score sort of by category, all the things that we do, how far along are they? And it's not necessarily pass fail. Who are the, and by product division with the owners. So we prepare that. By the way, this is not a gotcha exercise. When we do this, we do it roughly twice a year, sometimes more frequently. We review those cells with the particular business unit. Because the last thing you want to do is send a report up to management where something was wrong. The goal here is not per se putting people on report. It's showing us as a company how are we doing and how far have we come. But the fact that it gets distributed to the president and our chief executive officer, let's just say we use that to marketing advantage. Okay, we're planning on reporting these numbers to senior management in 2 months. And by the way, your numbers don't look so good, so now is your chance. Here's an opportunity to look better. So if you're not doing something, you should be doing it. The next 2 months would be a good time to get with the program. And so this is an extract. Notice that the names have been changed to protect the guilty, because again, my point here was not which product divisions haven't done what. This is what it looks like. So you can see all the different things that we say we do and how far in compliance is somebody. And over time, you want the whole thing to go green, meaning we're doing the right sorts of things. Now, by the way, we don't rest on our laurels here. One of the things we do with this is, as time wears on, we know more about what good development practice is. We may have other tools that we use. There may be additional things that we choose to add to this. So we don't think of this as go green, we can all retire.